This is straightforward advice to get more interest and offers in college recruiting in 2024. I've been through the recruiting process twice. I've played at two Division I schools. I've been through the transfer portal. I've played professionally. I've talked to thousands of parents and I've helped hundreds of families navigate recruiting. The things that I'm going to talk about in this video will help you or your kid get more interest and offers in college recruiting. Parents, your number one job in college recruiting is to weather the inevitable emotional storms throughout the process. Panic, frustration, and confusion will only make it worse. I know it's hard, but remove the emotion and focus on action. So much in the recruiting process is physical, and a lot of that goes down to the athlete. They have to play, they have to perform on the field, they go to the lessons, they practice, they send the emails. Even if you're sending the emails, they're participating and they're doing a lot of physical stuff. But there's another huge piece of recruiting. If you want to generate the kind of interest and offers that gives you options at the end of the process, and that other piece is emotional. You are heavily invested in your kid. It's your kid, and you've watched them put so much time and effort and blood and sweat and tears into this process just over the last 10 or 15 years, even when they were playing as a little kid. And you've watched them grow up and they have this dream, and you want to do everything that you can to help them accomplish that dream. And so there's a lot of emotion in the process. And I'll say this, it's not the kid who should be weathering the emotional piece of the process, but the parent. It's you that's watching this video, because the kid is going to feel every up and down in the process. When they send an email and they don't get a response back, they're going to get disheartened. When they make a video and nobody watches it, they're going to get disheartened. When a coach says that they're going to call and they don't, they're going to get bummed out. It is your job as a parent to weather that emotional storm. You need to be the even-keeled one. You need to set the example for the kid, because I'll tell you this, if you as the parent are riding the emotional storm and every minute of every day you are panicking or you're frustrated or you're confused about the process, it's going to be very challenging to make progress, because those feelings are going to keep you from doing the actions that you need to do in order to make that happen. It's really hard to be consistent with something when you feel a negative way about it. And so as the parent, it is critical, if your kid wants to play in college, that you are weathering the emotional storms, that you are controlling your temper, that you are reining it in. And instead of focusing on how you feel about the process, you're focusing on the actions that are going to get you the results that you're looking for. If you're anxious in recruiting, it's likely due to fear of the unknown. Not knowing if your kid is good enough, not knowing where to start, not knowing why your current strategy isn't working. If this describes you, then you need two things: education and action. It's normal to feel anxious about recruiting. A lot of people don't know what they're doing in the process. It's a complicated process. It's emotional. There's a lot of stuff going on here. But the biggest thing that keeps people from actually making progress, we just talked about emotion, and that biggest emotion that shows up is fear of the unknown. There's so many things that you don't know that it almost becomes paralyzing, and you're not sure what the next step is, so you don't take that step at all. You don't know where your kid belongs. Are they a D1 player? Are they D2 or D3? Maybe they're not good enough to play anywhere. And so what happens is, instead of figuring that out and trying and testing things, you just go, I don't really know where they belong, and then nothing ever happens and no progress is made. The same thing is true of, hey, I know my kid is good enough, but I just don't know where to start. If you don't know where to start, you have to figure out where to start. And that's where education comes into play. There's two pieces. You have education and you have action. If you have action, but you don't have education, then you don't know where to put all the effort and energy that you're ready to give. You have nothing to actually do it with. I've met parents and I've talked to parents and worked with parents who are go-getters. They work intense corporate jobs. They own businesses. They're doctors and lawyers, go-getters, really smart people with a lot of ambition. And they're ready to pour that into the recruiting process, but they haven't. Why? Because they don't know where to direct that energy. They're not sure what to do in the recruiting process, and that paralyzes them. And the solution to that is education. Learning what is the first step? How do I accomplish that step? What's step 2? What's step 3? What are the things that could go wrong? How do I make sure that I don't fail? How can I set myself up best to succeed? Those are the things that, if you have them in place for a go-getter, will produce incredible results. Or not knowing why your current strategy isn't working. You're like, I don't really know what's going on now. You have to figure out where the bottleneck is. The question is, what is the constraint? What is the thing that if you solve that one thing, you're going to dramatically improve your recruiting process and make a lot more progress? What is that one thing? Now, it's probably not just one thing that's wrong with your process if you don't have interest in offers right now, but there's probably one thing that's more important than all the other things. And that should be the only thing that you are concerned about right now, is solving that one bottleneck. And once you solve that bottleneck, then you can move into the second and third and fourth and fifth bottlenecks, and they just continue down the line. But you need both education and action. If you are anxious in the process, the best thing that you can do is take action. There's nothing better for your anxiety than making progress. Even if you're not getting more interest in offers right away, you're taking steps in the right direction to do that. And I can't tell you how many families, as soon as they just get a clear game plan and they take the first steps, even if they haven't seen any results yet, I can't tell you how many times they feel relief. And it's not because they're now drowning in interest in offers. They're not right away. It doesn't happen overnight, but they still feel relief because they know that they're headed in the right direction and they're taking steps toward that goal. And so if you are anxious in the process right now, it probably means that you're either lacking education or action. People still haven't realized that you can get more exposure from college coaches by sending a bunch of emails in a weekend than from traveling to that showcase across the country for a school you've never talked to before. When you go to a showcase or a camp, and those schools have never heard of you or your kid, they've never heard from you, they know nothing, and you just show up, the odds that your kid shows up to that event, plays incredibly well, the school needs their position in grad class, your kid is better than everyone else that's at that event, and everything goes right, the stars align, the odds that that happens are incredibly low. That's why going to recruiting events like showcases and camps without already being in contact with the coaches that are there is roulette. It's like a casino. It's a very small percentage of people win big and everyone else loses. That's what showcases and camps are in the recruiting process. And so what's funny is that everyone spends all this time trying to figure out what are the right showcases and camps for us to go to? How do we pick those events? But you're trying to pick events with insufficient information. You're just picking random events. Whereas if you were in contact with schools already, now you're picking events based on sufficient, or at least more sufficient, information than you had before. You can say, I'm already talking to these schools, so it makes sense for me to go to those events because they already know who I am. When my kid steps on campus, they have a competitive advantage right off the bat before they even step on the field or the court. That is what you're looking for. And so in a weekend, you could go send a bunch of emails to college coaches and likely get more interest and more exposure to college coaches than you could from some random showcase across the country. And people are still trying to pay their way into college, but what's happening is that you're actually just throwing more money at the casino and the house is taking it all. And you should be spending your time on activities that actually have tangible metrics that you can track and improve. So instead of going to a casino and randomly betting, it's more like you're counting cards. And so you have an actual plan and you're increasing the odds and putting them in your favor. Don't compare yourself to other athletes in recruiting. It's you versus you. Be the first to show up, the last to leave, make every rep count, have good nutrition, recover well, upgrade your habits, upgrade your future. The comparison game is the most dangerous game in recruiting. You're looking at all of these other families. If you're the parent and you're like, why does that kid have more interest in offers than my kid, even though my kid is the better player? Have you ever felt that before? Because a lot of parents are sitting there going, that doesn't make any sense to me. But you're playing the comparison game, and let me tell you, that is not going to improve your process in any way, shape, or form. It's just going to emotionally drain you, and we talked about that earlier in this video, and that emotion is going to make it harder for you to take the actions that you need to take in order to make the progress that you want to make. The comparison game is trash. It is an absolute waste of time. Every single person's recruiting process is unique and different. It's not going to happen the same for everyone. There will be people who show up to a random showcase or tournament, play really well, get an offer that day, and then go, yeah, you should go to showcases and camps because that's how you get offers. No, they just got lucky, right? They just got lucky. There will be people who send hundreds of emails and only get 2 responses. There will be people who send hundreds of emails and get 50 responses. Every single person's process is unique. You should not be comparing your results to someone else's results when they are playing a completely different game. Just because you are in the same arena of recruiting does not mean that you are playing the same game. And the more that you compare yourself to other people, the more dissatisfied you're going to be with where you are right now. And dissatisfaction can be good in terms of motivating you to do something. But if that dissatisfaction turns into disheartenment, where you are now just completely beside yourself and paralyzed that you can't make any progress, that's when it becomes a problem. And so put the blinders on like a racehorse. You are moving in your lane and your lane only. Do the things that you can control as a kid or as a parent. Be the first to show up. Be the last to leave. Be intentional about every rep that you put in. Care about the little details. There's so much in college recruiting that you can't control, so you want to control as much of what is in your control as you possibly can. Don't play the comparison game. It will drain you forever. Get to the point where a non-response or rejection from a college coach doesn't bother you at all. The recruiting process isn't personal, it's a numbers game. Throw more irons in the fire. Listen, you're gonna get rejected in recruiting more than you're gonna succeed, and it's not even close. Like, your kid is gonna send 100 emails to coaches, and 90 of those are not gonna respond, and 10 of them will. And you'll be like, Jack, that doesn't make any sense. How does that work? It's the way the recruiting process is. It's a math game. It's a math game. It's not personal. It's not that they're saying your kid is a terrible player. Your kid might be a great player. They might just not need your position in grad class. Doesn't matter how good you are. They're not recruiting your position in grad class. It could just be that. Even if it's that your kid is not a good enough player, don't take it personally. They just don't think they're good enough. And the other thing you have to remember is that recruiting for skill-based sports is subjective. If your kid plays a skill-based sport, which would be baseball, basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse, volleyball, softball, those are skill-based sports, meaning there is no one single metric that a coach can look at to determine if a player is good or not. It's subjective. Some coaches will think a player is good, other coaches will not think that a player is good. Unless you play a time-based sport, which would be like track and field or swimming, that's objective. It's like, who has the fastest time? But for all of these other sports, it's subjective. I had Mississippi State give me a full ride after watching one game, and another school, Virginia Tech, was watching the exact same game and said, you're not good enough to play here. How does that happen? Because recruiting is subjective. And so you have to get to the point where sending an email to a coach and not getting a response does not bother you at all. And the thing is, the first 10 emails that you send that you don't get a response to, they're going to bother you. And then you're going to send 20 and it's going to bother you a little less. And then 50, a little less. 100, by the time you send 100 and you're not getting responses from some of them, you're just going to shake off rejection like it's no problem. Because that's how recruiting works. It's just a numbers game. It's not personal. And as long as you can separate those two things, you're going to continue to contact more and more and more schools, which is going to get you better and better and better results. It's a math equation. It's a numbers game. Don't take it personal. Hang around 5 lazy teammates, you'll be the 6th. Hang around 5 committed teammates, you'll be the 6th. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Choose your circle of influence wisely. You've probably heard you're the average of the 5 people you most associate with or you spend the most time with. And it's absolutely true. Whoever you are spending your time around is what you will become. Now, this is obvious for players, right? The application for players is easy. You say, oh, you got to be, around the ones that work hard, the ones that show up early, the ones that stay late. But parents, if you're watching this right now, this also applies to you. What parents are you hanging around in the bleachers or at games or that you're texting within a group chat? And are they lifting you up and encouraging you and moving your recruiting process forward? Or are they absolutely draining you and they're complaining and they're just taxing? Which kind of people are you around? And also, what kind of people do you want to be around? Because I can tell you, if you spend all your time around parents who are complaining all the time and struggling with the coach and saying, oh, it's his fault and blaming other people, then you're going to do that too. And not only is it going to be emotionally exhausting, but you're going to get worse results in recruiting. So this tweet, this idea does not just apply to athletes, it applies just as much to parents. You are who you hang around. Your environment will dictate the product that comes out the other side. And the good news is that for the most part, you can dictate your environment. Sure, you might not be able to change your travel team on a whim or your high school team. I get that. But you can change who you're spending time around at those events, or how you're spending your time, who you're talking to, who you're taking advice from, who you're consoling, right? Those are the types of decisions that you can make that are within your control. And so we just talked about, hey, control what you can control. That applies here too. Your environment will dictate the product. Who you hang around is who you will become. Choose your circle of influence wisely. Don't narrow your school list. Reach out to D1s, reach out to D2s, reach out to D3s, reach out to NAIA schools, reach out to junior colleges, contact hundreds of schools, generate lots of interest, filter down from that interest. This is the way. One of the biggest issues that I see families coming to me with is that they've narrowed right from the start the number of schools that they're interested in and contacting. They read in some recruiting book somewhere that they should put 20 to 30 schools on a list. I'm here to tell you that in 2024, it's not enough. You're giving yourself an incredibly small window to succeed, and the odds that that happens are insanely small. Most athletes are going to average a 10% reply rate, and that's if you're doing everything right and your kid is a good player, which means if you contact 20 to 30 schools, you could expect 10% of those, 2 to 3 responses. And if a third of those turn into offers, you're looking at one potential option for your kid. And that's if everything goes well. Now, have we had families do a lot better than that? Yeah. Are there families who don't get that? Yeah. It's called recruiting. And so if you want to increase the odds that your kid has options at the end of the process, then you need to increase the number of schools that you contact. So this also comes down to talent evaluation. I get a lot of parents who say, can you watch my video, my kid's video, and tell me if you think they're good enough? I just told you before that recruiting is subjective. I could say that a kid is good, and a college coach could disagree, and my opinion means nothing, because the college coach is the one who has the money, and they have the opportunities. And recruiting is subjective in that way. So if you truly want to know how good your kid is, the best, most foolproof way to do that is contact schools at every level and see what the market tells you. See what schools respond and from which divisions and conferences. If you contact schools at every level and you get a bunch of D1 interest, your kid's probably a D1 player, and you could spend more time reaching out to D1 schools because you have that validated. If you've reached out to schools at every level and you only get D3 interest, then it's likely that your kid is not a D1 caliber player. And if you continue to bang your head against the D1 brick wall, you're probably not going to get the interest and offers that you were hoping for. But if you take that validation, you go, okay, but we have D3, and you spend time pursuing more D3s, you could potentially get 10, 15, 20 interested schools in D3. Then you have lots of options. You might be able to get merit. You might be able to get a scholarship in a D2 or something like that. And so that is really what you should be aiming for, is contacting lots of schools and lots of different kinds of schools, because I can guarantee you, even if your kid is a D1 athlete and a D1 caliber athlete, It's not going to hurt you to get interest from a bunch of D2s and D3s. In no way is that going to hurt you. The only way that's going to really help you, or you're not even thinking about, is if all those D1s vanish and now you have something to fall back on because you contacted more than just D1. Most families are very happy that they contacted lots of schools and lots of different kinds of schools when they get to the end of the process and they really didn't get interest from their top schools. They're like, thank God we emailed or contacted all these other schools, because we would have nothing right now if we didn't do that. And if you get a ton of D1 interest, then you just tell all the other divisions to kick rocks. Just because you get interest from a school doesn't mean you have to go there, but you can't go back in time. If you wait until senior year to do this, you can't go back in time and be like, okay, I'm gonna do it differently this time. No, you can't do that. So you might as well go wide in the beginning, and then you can always filter down from there. But I can tell you, even when you get later in the process, this becomes huge because of leverage. So for instance, let's say that you're talking to your dream school. Let's say you contacted 10 schools and we have that 10% reply rate. So your kid gets one school that responds and it is their dream school. And you're like, we don't care that we only got one response. It's our dream school. We're so excited. We don't have an offer yet, but we think that it's coming. The problem is that you might not get anything else. And that school, your dream school, can take as long as they want and drag their feet because you are not a threat to commit. You don't have any other interest or offers. So your dream school can drag their feet all they want because you're not going to be off the table. Your kid's not going to be off the table tomorrow. And what that does is, one, it slows down your process, but two, it also gives your dream school time to go find somebody that's better than your kid. The more time that you leave that up to chance, the less likely you are to get that opportunity. You're playing with fire if you're only contacting the schools that you are most interested in. Not to mention, the more interest that you have, the more attractive you look to your top schools. Your top school comes along, hey, we love you, we think you look great. Who else are you talking to? And you say, well, nobody, because I only contacted 20 schools. They're going to be like, well, why not? If you were a good player, wouldn't you have a ton of interest? But let's say they come along, they're like, hey, who else are you talking to? You're like, oh, I'm talking to 10 other schools. They're like, oh, okay, this player is wanted by lots of other schools. That makes you way more attractive. And it's simply because you contacted way more schools and you contacted schools at every division level. I think it's entirely possible that your kid is motivated to play at the next level, but not motivated to send emails, make videos, etc. There's a ton on these kids' plates between school, practices, games, lessons, workouts, chores, homework, tests, and fun. It's a lot. There's this notion, usually it's from travel and club coaches and recruiters, like not college coach recruiters, like people who help with the recruiting process. And they say, listen, if your kid wants it, they're going to send the emails themselves. They're going to make the videos. They're going to do these things. And I have to tell you, if someone says that to you, they are completely out of touch with recruiting in 2024. They have no idea what they're talking about. It's like the same people who are talking about buying a house and thinking that housing prices were like they were in like the 80s, right? And it's a completely different world now than it was then. And so people who are saying, yeah, your kid needs to do all the work, have no clue what's going on in recruiting right now. Because your kid is going to school for 6 hours, and then they go to practice, and then they have weights, and then they go to their lesson, and then they have homework, and then they study for their test, and then they have chores around the house, and then they hang out with their friend for a little bit. By the way, we haven't even talked about recruiting yet. Making videos, sending emails, posting on social media, DMing coaches, following up with coaches, going to events. Like, how? How are they supposed to do all these things? And so the system is not set up for kids to succeed. It's set up for them to fail. And so that's why, listen, parents, help your kids with this stuff. Pay people to help your kids with this stuff because there's so much on their plates right now. I think it's delusional for someone to believe that a 16-year-old can do all of this and be emotionally and mentally healthy. Like most 40-year-olds can't even do this. And we're talking about a 16-year-old? Come on now. And so I think that It's entirely possible that your kid really wants to play at the next level and they want to go play sports in college and they're serious about that. But it's hard for them to send emails. I don't think that means they're not serious. I think they just need help. I think the same thing for videos. Like, the recruiting process is hard. We're talking about 16-year-olds. Like, cut them a break. I think it's possible that your kid is entirely motivated but struggles to do some of the work. Follow up with schools that don't respond. It's likely that the majority of interest that you get from an email campaign will come from your follow-up emails, not the first email. I can tell you this is completely backed by data. Looked at the data over and over and over and over and over again. You must follow up with schools that have not replied to you or given you the time of day. You will get more interest if you do this. There's this notion that coaches are going to get really upset if you contact them multiple times. And sure, if you contact them 15 times in a month and they haven't expressed interest, then yes, they are going to get annoyed by that. So maybe don't do that. But that doesn't mean that you just send one email or DM and hope that it works out. That's also not a good plan. You should be following up with schools both who have expressed interest and haven't expressed interest. And the data shows that this is absolutely critical. You will likely get more responses from follow-ups than the initial email. And so I talked to a lot of parents who said, listen, we sent 50 emails out. We sent 100 emails out. We didn't get any responses. And I'll say, did you send follow-ups to those schools? No, we didn't do that. Okay, then I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. In some cases, we've tripled the number of schools that responded just by sending 2 or 3 emails. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be doing this. It's actually one of the most important parts of the process. And one thing I'll say here, because again, back to like the annoying thing, so many people are worried about what college coaches think of them and making friends. Yeah, you should care what they think of you in terms of talent, like your kid. You should care about that because they're the ones who have the opportunities and the money. But let me be clear, you are not trying to make friends in this process. You're not trying to walk away with a bunch of college coaches who think that you're really cool and really like you. That's not the goal. The goal is to get your kid to a school that they really like and hopefully get scholarship money so you're not paying full tuition. That's the goal. And so when you talk about following up with schools, it's sure, you're not trying to make friends. If they haven't expressed interest in you already, what's the worst that can happen? They don't respond to you? They're already not talking to your kid. Like, what do you think is going to happen here? They might tell you to stop. Okay, then stop. But like, you don't have anything to lose by continuing to contact coaches and try and get them on the hook and show them that your kid can help them solve their problems, can help them win a championship. You're not here to make friends. Yeah, you want to be kind and you want to be respectful. 100%. But you're ultimately not here to make friends. You're here to get opportunities. And so if schools are not taking notice of your kid, if they're not paying attention, then you need to make them pay attention. College recruiting doesn't always make sense. Coaches choose players that you wouldn't choose. Teams recruit positions it looks like they already have. Teams your kid is capable of playing at don't respond. Endless cases. Stop trying to make sense of chaos. There's so much going on in recruiting that you can't control that doesn't make any sense to you. And if you continue to try to make sense of nonsense, you're going to drive yourself crazy. This used to be a thing when I was playing pro ball. This used to be a thing all the time because guys would get called up and down between different levels, right? And when someone would get called up, it didn't really feel like they deserved it, guys in the locker room would go absolutely crazy. They'd be like, I'm better than that guy. How come I didn't get called up or get that opportunity? And you know what would happen next? That guy would then go on a slump. And he wouldn't play well for a while and actually hurt his chances of getting that call because he was so concerned about making sense of the nonsense. In recruiting, it's the same thing. If you're so worried all the time about why that player is getting interest but your kid is not, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Listen, coaches might just not need your position in grad class. They might just not think that your kid is good enough. There's lots of reasons why a school might not recruit your kid. There's lots of reasons why things happen in recruiting, and you're not going to know all of them. Usually when you're navigating through recruiting, you're dealing with insufficient information. You don't have enough information to make a logical decision. When you try to make a logical decision with insufficient information, it's incredibly challenging, and it's very frustrating. And so a lot of you are trying to do that right now. You're trying to make decisions and make sense of things that aren't supposed to be made sense of. It's just chaos. You will feel so much better emotionally if you say, I just can't control that. Like, that's completely out of my realm. I don't understand why that happens, but it also doesn't affect me. It doesn't matter. I need to stick to what I'm supposed to do, the actions that are going to get me results, my kid results. That's what I'm going to focus on. And the more that you focus on that and not all the emotional stuff, the better results that you're going to see. If you are the parent of a high school athlete and you need help in the recruiting process, I'll leave a link down below. You can schedule a call with us and we will walk you through how we help athletes and families through recruiting. Regardless, I will see you guys next time.